Hi, this is Len Furman, the Sports Time Traveler, bringing you exciting sporting events from exactly 50 years ago, as though they're happening now. Today's episode is titled Willie Mays, Say Hey, New York Never Saw This. We start with an introduction from the Sports Time Traveler. Today's article involves a bit of sports time travel archaeology, for in my virtual travels back in time, I've uncovered something never seen by most Mets fans in New York. It involves some of the great last on-field moments from Willie Mays. The prospect of making these types of monumental discoveries is what keeps me so excited in my daily sports time travels. I just have to share this one with you. Willie Mays finishes his career with the Mets. I'm a big Willie Mays fan. When I was a 9-year-old kid in the summer of 1973, I cherished the moments that I got to see 42-year-old Willie Mays playing for my Mets. It was surreal to have the greatest legend in the game on my team. And so I've always taken offense to the narrative that Willie should have hung it up before he came to the Mets in 1972. It was popular in the press at that time to bash Mays, saying that he was washed up and he was embarrassing himself and tarnishing his legacy with mediocre play. But I took the opposite view. I felt Mays had earned the opportunity to come back and play in New York at the end of his career and to contribute in any way he could, whether it was on the field or in the clubhouse. I loved having Willie Mays on the Mets. 50 years later, I still find it surreal that Willie was on our team. But Mays was actually playing pretty good on the Mets. This is the sad thing. The analytics of the time didn't reveal the great value he delivered for the Mets. For example, in 1972, Willie Mays led the Mets in on-base percentage at .402. By comparison to 2023, Brandon Nimmo currently leads the Mets in on-base percentage at just .359 as of today's date, August 26th, 1973. How great was Mays' .402 on-base percentage in 1972? It was good for second in the National League behind Joe Morgan. But of course, no fan had even heard of on-base percentage in 1972. Mays' hot spring in 1973. Then in the spring training of 1973, Mays was sensational, spraying the ball to all fields. The warm Florida weather suited Willie well. It was the only spring training he ever had in the Sunshine State because the Giants played spring training in Arizona his entire career. Mays said 1973 was his best spring training ever. He led the Mets batting .350, and he led the team with 3 home runs. A cold start to the season. But when Willie hit the cold weather in New York in April 1973 to begin the season, he couldn't get untracked. He got off to a horrid start and was quickly beset with injuries. In one game, his shoulder was so bad that he couldn't make a throw from center field. He tossed the ball to a stunned rookie left fielder, George Theodore, to throw it back to the infield. Mays had to go on the disabled list and missed nearly the entire month of May and early June. When he went hitless in his first couple of games back in June, Mays' average dipped to a humiliating .095 on June 11th, 1973. A summer resurgence. And then, for one last run, Willie Mays became the say hey kid once again. From June 27th through August 24th, he hit .279, making him a valuable contributor to the Mets. And in the first 3 weeks of August, he batted .321. The resurgence of Mays was on display in Atlanta on the nights of Monday, July 16th and Tuesday, July 17th, 1973, with 2 special moments that only Willie Mays could ever produce. Naturally, I had to get into the sports travel time machine and go back in time virtually to see this. Willie Mays Say Hey, New York Never Saw This, Atlanta, Georgia, July 18th, 1973. On Monday, 2 days ago, here in 1973, the Mets arrived in Atlanta for a night game that few people saw. The game was not broadcast on television, not in Atlanta, not in New York, not anywhere. Here in 1973, the nationally televised NBC Monday night game of the week takes precedence on TV, and that game featured St. Louis versus San Francisco. And there were hardly any people in the stadium either. It was a sparse crowd in Atlanta Stadium of just a little over 7,000 fans. Last games for Aaron and Mays on the same field. It was a shame that almost no one saw this game because it was the first of a 3-game series that will almost certainly mark the last time that Hank Aaron and Willie Mays play on a ball field at the same time. Both legends were there on the field on Monday night, starting in the outfield. Aaron was in left field for the Braves, and Mays was in his traditional position, center field, for the Mets. Here were the two men who stand at first and second place in career home runs in the National League. Only Babe Ruth, who played in the American League, is ahead of them on the all-time home run list. Coming into Monday's July 16th, 1973 game, the all-time home run list looked like this. First, Babe Ruth, 714. Second, Hank Aaron, 697. Third, Willie Mays, 658. Fourth, Harmon Killebrew, 544. Fifth place, Mickey Mantle, 536. Also, Frank Robinson, 536. Seventh, Jimmy Fox, 534. Eighth, Ted Williams, 521. Ninth, Ernie Banks, 512. Tied for ninth, Eddie Matthews, 512. 11th, Mel Ott, 511. 12th, Lou Gehrig, 493. It is interesting to note that a third player on the above list was in uniform in the stadium on Monday night. Eddie Matthews is the current manager of the Atlanta Braves. And one more home run legend was in the stadium that night, Monday, July 16th, 1973. Roger Maris, who broke the Babe's single-season home run mark 12 years ago with 61 in 1961, was on hand to watch the game with his 4 sons, the youngest of whom is a 9-year-old Mets fan. With Aaron closing in on Root's all-time home run record, Maris is suddenly in demand in baseball as the only other man who knows what it's like to chase the Babe. He was given box seats right behind the Braves dugout. A picture of Maris shaking Aaron's hand appeared on the front page of the sports section of the Atlanta Constitution on Tuesday. Aaron comes into this series among the league leaders in home runs this season with 24. He seems almost certain to catch Babe Ruth and become the all-time home run leader by late September. Note, the sports time traveler will be following Hank Aaron's pursuit of Babe Ruth. Willie Mays' resurgence. Willie Mays, meanwhile, is in the middle of what certainly appears to be the final season of his career. But after a poor and injury-riddled start to the year, he has hit the ball well for over a month now. And coming into this game, he has raised his batting average over 100 points from its horrific early season depths. Monday and Tuesday's games proved that Mays can still play and that he's giving it 100%. On Monday in the top of the first, he reached base when he was hit by a Phil Negro pitch as the knuckleballer was likely trying to pitch around Mays with Felix Mion on first. Dialing back to 1954. Then in the third inning, Mays made a play in center field that was nearly as great as any in his storied career. With 2 outs, Mets starter Jerry Koosman was facing Braves shortstop Marty Perez. Possessing little power, it is likely that Mays was playing shallow in center. Perez hit a deep fly to straightaway center field. Willie Mays turned and ran at full speed towards the center field fence. Red Foley of the New York Daily News wrote, He tried to emulate the famed going away over the head catch he made against Vic Wertz in the 1954 World Series. Wayne Minshew of the Atlanta Constitution wrote similarly that May's sprint to reach the ball was, quote, reminiscent of Willie's back to the infield grab of Vic Wertz's drive in the 1954 World Series. Michael Strauss wrote in the New York Times, Mays and the ball arrived at the barrier simultaneously. The outfielder courageously reached for the ball. The batter, Marty Perez, told Wayne Minshew of the Atlanta Constitution, he caught it for a second. Minshew himself wrote in his article, Mays had the ball for an instant. And then he crashes into the outfield fence. Red Foley of the New York Daily News described how Mays then hit the fence. Just as the 42-year-old center fielder appeared to snare the ball, he ricocheted off the screen and fell heavily to the ground. Mays' whack was incurred by ramming the screen with his forehead. Michael Strauss wrote in the New York Times, Mays succeeded in gloving it, only to have it pop out as he started falling. Minshew wrote, Mays hit the fence and had it fall out of his glove. The Braves' Marty Perez said, I almost stopped running. I thought he had it. Mays was knocked onto his back by the force of the crash into the fence, but he still managed to try and throw the ball while he was lying on the ground. Strauss described it this way. Mays picked up the ball and threw it backward over his head toward the plate. Minshew wrote, he gamely flipped the ball over his shoulder, but Perez was in to score by then. Marty Perez had an inside-the-park home run, his third home run of the year and the eighth of his entire career. But for one instant, Willie Mays had nearly completed a carbon copy of his greatest catch. Minshew wrote, Perez's blast was almost turned into a sensational play by Mets center fielder Willie Mays. After the play, Mays lay motionless on his back in deep center field. Strauss described it. With Mays lying on the grass, out rushed Berra, trainer Tom McKenna, most of the Mets players, and all of the tenants of the nearby Braves bullpen. Mays moved his legs about slowly and then his arms to make sure there were no injuries. Then he announced he was ready to continue. Willie Mays stayed in the game. When play resumed, Darrell Evans grounded out to end the third inning, with the Braves ahead 2-0. And then Willie Mays was right back in action, leading off the top of the fourth with a double to deep left, and then scored the Mets' first run of the game, racing from second to home when Cleon Jones hit a single. The Mets scored another run later in the inning and tied the game at 2. Mays played the entire game and got another hit in the ninth when he hit a single to center. He finished the game 2 for 4. Willie Mays, however, could not help the hapless Mets defeat the Braves. The Braves scored 5 times in the 7th, and the Mets lost the game 8-6. It was their 50th loss of the year to go with just 28 wins, and the Mets are still in last place. It's beginning to look hopeless. Pictures of the catch and crash. Pictures of the catch and crash, incredibly, did not appear in any Atlanta or New York area newspapers, but it was picked up via wire by the Tampa Times. I was so excited when I found these pictures. Let's take a look at the dramatic 4-picture sequence. Here in the first picture, Mays is about to make the sensational back to the infield catch. He is just in front of the outfield fence. You can see the ball just about to land in his glove. Here in the second picture, Mays has caught the ball, smashed into the fence, and is thrown backwards. The ball appears to be in his glove. Third, Mays grabs the ball after it's popped out and tries to fling it backwards as Mets left fielder Cleon Jones mirrors Mays. And finally, Mays lays motionless on his back after the play as Cleon Jones turns and looks towards the infield. Now, for anyone who has never seen The Catch from the 1954 World Series, The Catch that turned Willie Mays from a great player into a legend of almost mythical stature. Let's take a look at that video.
There's a long drive, way back in center field, way back, it is. Willie May just brought this crowd to its feet with a catch, which must have been an optical illusion to a lot of people. And Willie
Now we'll come back to our slideshow.
There's a long drive.
Now let's talk about the game the next day on July 2nd, 1973, as we go back 50 years. The second game of the series was played last night. This time it was on TV on WOR Channel 9 in New York, but there were again well under 10,000 people in the stands. Aaron started in left field, but Mays was on the bench, feeling stiff from his crash into the fence on Monday night. Yogi Berra made an odd move and started as ace reliever Tug McGraw. McGraw responded by giving up a home run to the Braves' first batter of the game, Ralph Garr. In the sixth, McGraw also gave up a home run to Marty Perez, his second in 2 games, and another home run, number 698, to Hank Aaron. Aaron told Ed Shearer of the AP, "I felt like when I hit it, it was just icing on the cake. It was the 6th run of the game for Atlanta." The move to start McGraw had backfired. The Braves led the game 7-1 going into the 9th inning. The Mets opened the 9th with a single by Wayne Garrett. After Felix Mion lined out, Rusty Staub belted a home run to cut the deficit to 7-3. Next up was Cleon Jones, who singled to center. John Milner followed with a home run, and suddenly the Mets were down by just 2 runs at 7-5 and still had only 1 out. The next batter, catcher Ron Hodges, grounded out, and now the Mets were down to their last out. Braves 7, Mets 5, top of the 9th inning, 2 outs. Don Hahn, who started in center for Mays, singled to keep the game alive. Then Ed Kranepool walked, and Teddy Martinez was brought in as a pinch runner. The next batter, Jim Beecham, singled to right, scoring Hahn and sending Martinez to third. Now the Mets were down just by 1 run, 7-6, with the tying run on third base. The scheduled next batter was lefty Wayne Garrett. Braves manager Eddie Matthews brought in a left-handed pitcher, Tom House. Yogi Berra countered by bringing up a right-handed pinch hitter for Garrett, Willie Mays. Willie Mays pinch hits. Mays stepped in with runners on first and third and 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th, and the Mets down a run. House got ahead of the count on Mays 1-2. The Mets, who had come valiantly back, were now down to their last strike. Red Foley in the New York Daily News describes what happened on the next pitch. Willie, despite a sore back from Monday night's collision with the center field fence, responded in the way that has always set him apart from other ball players. House had Willie 1-2, but Willie punched the next pitch into right center, a plate Martinez from third. So the Mets had tied the game on Mays' hit. Meanwhile, Willie Mays cleverly took a wide turn at first base to draw the attention of the relay thrower, Braves second baseman Davy Johnson. Mays told Wayne Minshew of the Atlanta Constitution, "I made the big turn at first, figuring that they were looking at me." That proved to make the difference for Mets runner Jim Beecham, as Johnson's throw to the plate was high. Michael Strauss in the New York Times wrote, "Mays' hit was so long that Beecham, who does not have the reputation of being fleet, hoofed it all the way home from first, just beating the throw to the plate." The Mets now led 8-7. When Mets pitcher Harry Parker, normally a starter, retired the Braves in order in the bottom of the 9th, it sealed one of the most improbable victories in Mets franchise history. They had come from 6 runs down to win the game. And the hero was none other than the say hey kid, Willie Mays, coming off the bench, shaking off a bruised head and body from smashing into the fence the night before to sock the game winner when the Mets were down to their last strike. Ed Shearer of the AP opened his article about the game with this: Willie Mays, aging superstar of the New York Mets, upstaged Hank Aaron again Tuesday night. For Willie's part, he brushed the heroics. He told the UPI, "That's what I'm supposed to do." Willie Mays is a 300 hitter again. Willie Mays is now enjoying a summer resurgence in 1973. With 3 hits in his last 5 at bats, Mays is now batting .327 since June 27th, going 18 for 55 in that stretch, with 8 of his 18 hits going for extra bases. Going back further, Mays is hitting .290 and 93 at bats since June 12th, shortly after he came off the injured list. But even with the win last night, the Mets are still in last place. Postscript from the Sports Time Traveler. 2 days later, on Thursday, July 19th, 1973, Wayne Minshew of the Atlanta Constitution, one of the few people to see Monday's game, wrote this about Willie Mays. Like Willie Mays or not, it was a good feeling to watch him cavort all about the place as he did Monday night in that 8-6 Atlanta victory. For the truly great ones come few and far between. Willie hit, he ran the bases, and he rendered a brief glimpse into the past when he almost picked off Marty Perez's drive with his back to the infield. It looked for all the world like that nationally wire service distributed photo of Mays robbing Vic Wertz in the Polo Grounds during the 1954 World Series. It was also the last complete game that Hank Aaron and Willie Mays ever played against each other. Thanks so much for watching. Please share your feedback. And if you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe to see all my articles and my podcast, www.thesportstimetraveler.com. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye now.